Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Ben, this is Books of Benny'sCon, and today I want to dig into the Dandelion Dynasty by Ken Liu and my experience with it over the last couple months. So I read all 4 books for the first time recently, and it is an interesting series for me. It got me thinking a lot, and it was not one of those series that I just kind of got completely lost and immersed in, and was gripped to the page the whole time and really emotionally invested. It wasn't one of those easy, just 5-star series that became a new favorite of all time. It was kind of a mixed bag for me, where there were aspects that I absolutely loved and adored, and certain chapters and sequences just had me gripped to that normal level that I love. But then for other parts and long stretches, I was just finding myself less invested, and I've been trying to think over the last couple weeks, what was going on? What were aspects that I loved? What were things that were maybe keeping me from falling fully for this series? And so here I want to get into 3 things that I did love about it and mix in 3 things that I did not. And I've seen lots of just wholehearted full praise for the series, and so I want to give a kind of more balanced look at my experience. And for people who have not read it yet, I want to give a non-spoiler kind of summary of some of these things that were working really well for me and some that weren't. And if you have read it, I'd love to hear your thoughts on my experience of these points. So this is not going to be a full exhaustive review of all aspects of the books. I'll just focus on certain things that really stood out to me as loving, or in some cases not. So I'll start with one thing that I absolutely loved, especially in retrospect, as I'm kind of thinking through the experience and coming to a greater appreciation for what it's doing. And that is its thematic exploration. So this is a very theme-forward book series where I feel like Liu is really starting with some themes that he wants to explore and develop around the change to modernity, the founding of America, bringing in history and cultural references from East Asia, and exploring a lot of different themes around modernity. And there were a couple that stood out as being just done so well, and in a way that I just haven't seen in other fantasy series. One of those is how we kind of create history and mythology and then kind of reckon with it from the recent past, how we continually kind of create and recreate the past, and how that is done with both recent history and kind of long ago ancient history. And there's a mix of how the history in this world really kind of plays a role in the present, but it's done in such a unique way because the first book, Grace of Kings, kind of covers a lot of ground with this really important moment in this continent of Dara, and there's lots of changes going on and huge events that some larger than life figures are a part of, and we see all that play out on a kind of grand scale, almost like it's a history book. The way that the events from book 1 kind of inform characters and their mindsets and their worldviews and their values was so cool, and to see characters trying to wrangle with that history and come to a deeper understanding of it, or how they got it skewed from the actual events that we saw happen. Man, all of that was done in such a compelling way. And so that theme was a really fantastic one. And then another one is the theme of Clash of Civilizations, and how a multicultural society can kind of come into conflict or try to move beyond cycles of violence and live harmoniously together. I feel like this is one of Liu's most important themes that he kind of explicitly wanted to explore over the course of the whole series, and it's something that's extremely relevant to our modern world today, and it was just done in a way through the major kind of plot movement of the last 3 books especially. And I don't want to give away too much about how he did it, because there's something that happens in book 2. I felt like the story was kind of suffering in book 2 by really focusing in on the court politics in Dara. It was called the Dandelion Dynasty. I was worried the series was just going to be exploring this Dandelion court, but then this incident happens in the middle of book 2 where the whole scope of the series gets expanded, and we really bring in new locations, multiple locations, and the resonances between them, the differences, and the ability it gives Liu to explore this theme of how people from different backgrounds and places and with different histories and mythologies can come into conflict, but then try to learn about the other, or to live in a multicultural place. And so that was done in a way that I don't think I've seen before, really, and was just masterfully explored. Now to something that I didn't love, and that would be many of the antagonists. So I tend not to love the more exaggerated kinds of antagonists who feel more two-dimensional, not fully complex, and ones who don't have a lot of depth and feel like who you could get the sense of them really quickly on the page and that they don't change or develop much beyond that initial picture. And yeah, I don't love that in a lot of other series, but in this series there were a bunch of them, and they had POVs some of the time, so I just felt like some of these antagonists, we spent way too much time with them or in their POV, making certain things feel, to me, just less compelling than they otherwise would have been if they would have kind of had less page time, or if maybe they would have had more depth to them, been a little more complex and mysterious. I mean, one of the antagonists is a complete psychotic lunatic who is going around torturing people, killing innocent civilians, killing babies on the page, and that just was taking me out of the story. And I know that these types of people exist, and it's not unrealistic, but it still hurts my investment when the antagonists and villains just are kind of these caricatures, exaggerated portraits of evil. And in some cases, there were characters who were obviously untrustworthy and who demonstrated their untrustworthiness, and then characters still trust them to kind of hold a really important plan completely secret and to involve them in an extremely crucial plan, and just, things like that played out in predictable ways. And I feel like these exaggerated personas just took away from the depth and complexity of the whole series, and were not worthy of the series. And I just wish she would have done a little something different with a bunch of the antagonists. The second thing that I loved are the action sequences, and these to me were a real highlight of the series. And especially, like, book one is really fast moving, and I found a lot of those action sequences just ridiculously engaging, but the way that Liu does them in books 2, 3, and 4 are very different, in that there are some huge action set pieces that take up a lot of pages, maybe a bunch of chapters, but there are not that many of them, but they are so important to the overall narrative, to some of the main characters' journeys. And Liu, through these action sequences, he will stop right in the middle and go on this big backstory tangent and show you how certain people maybe discovered a new invention, or a piece of new knowledge, or discovered something that would be useful or relevant to the battle happening in the present. And then we would work through that tangent, see that discovery happen, and then it'd be so cool. I'd be thinking about, how are they going to apply this in the battle? And then we jump into back to the present, and it always felt so creative and imaginative and interesting, the way that the discovery or the new understanding got integrated in to the action sequence. And I found some of these to just be offering something new. I've read so many action and fantasy battle sequences, and so I love it when they can feel fresh and surprise me. And there were just such a variety of different ones here in Liu's trademark silk punk style. Liu just is having characters invent and learn a lot of new mechanical technology over the course of the series, and just that's a real highlight as I was reading. It was always a delight to see those backstories, but then the action is really gritty and heart-stopping and tense, and just the way that these sequences played out, and sometimes in multi-parts, just was always had me on the edge of my seat. And I maybe even wish that there was more action. I think Liu is so spectacular with these sequences that I could have had more, but at least there were some throughout all of the books, and especially in Speaking Bones, the grand finale, there were some big multi-part battle sequences and action sequences, and some of the ones that come at the beginnings of the books, like the one toward the beginning of Veiled Throne, Speaking Bones, like, oh man, they were some of my favorite action battle set pieces I can ever remember reading. All right, the second thing that I didn't love was the way Liu handled a lot of the side characters throughout the series. And so this is a partial complaint, because about half of the side characters felt fully three-dimensional and vibrant and jumped off the page, and he would give them interesting backstories and really distinctive personalities and dialogue, and I felt like I could fully imagine a lot of the side characters. But the problem is, for every one of those side characters, there was one that just didn't get that love and attention from Lou and just never jumped off the page and kind of just remained a kind of static name for me. And so there's one side character we meet, just a soldier, Moda Creepy, and we just get he's this really strong, super strong soldier, and then we get his backstory, and we just jump back into his childhood, and he was this kind of weakling, but he was inspired by this historical figure to kind of get strong, and he became super strong, and just we got this mini backstory, and it brought him to life. And then later in the battle sequence, when we return to Moda, and he's on this airship and he's in danger, like, I felt the stakes of that. I did not want him to come to harm. But for every Moda, there were other characters who I just never had a real sense of, like Than Karakonu or Moon Sakri. And these names kept popping up, but having no weight behind them. And Lou does really great things for a lot of the side characters, especially with kind of last moments. A lot of them will go out in this really brave moment of sacrifice and courage and heroism. But for a lot of these moments, like, they were characters I just did not really have a feel for. And so those moments didn't often land too much for me. I mean, just thinking of different side character groups, for every To'of who felt so real, there was a Radia, or in the Blossom Gang, for the Ratiera, this wheelchair-bound engineering genius, self-taught kind of maverick who has such this awesome, vibrant personality. There's Owidi, the lawyer character, who is just so bland and barely had a personality on the page. And so I know Lou had the ability to bring all these side characters to life, but then kind of only used that power selectively, or just I know these are long books, and so I hate to say he could have expanded the word count, but I don't know, either not having as many of the named side characters, or just spending a tiny bit more effort to bring some of them to life would have, I think, gone a long way for me, because there were just way too many of them that just felt like names. Now to the third thing I loved. I've been ragging a bit on the character work, so I want to focus on an aspect of the character work that did completely work for me, and that is with a lot of the more optimistic kind of protagonist characters. I felt these characters in a way that was so heartfelt, and that these characters did jump off the page, and I felt like Lou's heart and soul was in writing these characters. And so I'd say the character work with a lot of the child or young adult characters in particular, and a few of the adult characters who had this same childlike spirit to them. This grouping of characters really was just an absolute pleasure to spend time with. And man, I don't want to give away really any specifics about characters, but basically all of the young generation in the last part of the series, and as we watch them kind of from a younger childhood age to kind of grow into their adulthood, just basically all of them, and seeing them wrangle with their identities and their expectations and their family pests, and trying to come into their own identities, and watching these characters try to help society progress and move beyond just the way things have been in the past, move beyond cycles of violence, was inspiring. And I'm thinking about some of just my favorite, most memorable moments from the whole series. I mean, some of them just are very simple and involve a child character in a hot air balloon with their teacher asking questions about the world, or two teenagers involved in a cooking competition and kind of, falling for each other, but being very shy about it, and working through their kind of nascent romance, communicating with these very intelligent giant narwhal animal characters and going on rides with them. Some of these moments just felt so innocent, and I feel they helped bring to life Lou's more positive, optimistic vision, and that really spoke to me here. Which brings me to the last thing that I didn't love, and that has to do with what I was just talking about, with what I was loving. And this is the tonal clash that I feel is happening throughout the series between that more optimistic, youthful, heartfelt tone that's present in a lot of the character POVs, even in the omniscient narrator and the voice of the omniscient narrator, and the clash of that with a lot of the extremely brutal, grimdark level moments and events that happen throughout the series as well. I mean, there's some of the most grisly, grim moments I've ever read happen here, and I rarely think that they needed to happen on the page or happen the way they did or to go as far. I feel like Lou's heart wasn't in those moments, and they often didn't have a kind of weight to me, just like some of the exaggerated antagonists didn't fully feel organic to the story. I feel like Lou's heart and soul was in the more optimistic side of this story, and that he almost maybe felt obligated to include a lot of these darker moments because they do reflect the darker side of humanity, and they are all things I've seen him say as a justification for including a lot of these, that everything that happened in this series has happened in real life. But that doesn't really satisfy me as an explanation. So, if I wanted to read about all the dark things humanity has done to itself, I would read nonfiction history, and I have done that in college in reading some of the most brutal things that humanity did to itself during World War II. And I don't necessarily need that in my secondary world epic fantasy. I feel like Lou is trying to transcend our reality somewhat and show us a vision for something new of what our world could be. And I don't think he needs to illustrate, what we've done on Earth in terms of the dark side to get his point across. I think he could have leaned more into the YA feel and emotional tenor of a lot of the rest of the books, and stayed away from some of those grittier, brutal moments, and had basically the same thematic vision come across. And so I personally did not love this very clear clash of tones that was happening, and it often, I felt like, was giving me whiplash throughout my read. And if Lou just would have gone full YA in this series, I think that I would have had a better time with it, or just leaned a little bit away from the darker side and kept the kind of feel closer to something of like a Stormlight Archive. That might have served this story better for me. But I know a lot of other people haven't had this issue, so this wrangling with this kind of clashing of tones and the more optimistic vision with the dark side of human reality on Earth, for a lot of people, I think that really works. And so this is not something that's an objective criticism. I think Lou is really explicitly trying to show that clash. And for me, I think it often left me feeling like it was harder for me to suspend my disbelief and just sink into this narrative, and felt like it was more just not organic to this particular story and setting. And so, yeah, that, I think, when I'm really trying to analyze my experience with the series, is one of these major things that's holding it back from just becoming an all-time favorite, where I can just fully, easily recommend this to everyone and anyone as an epic fantasy read. So that was a kind of exploration of my mixed experience with the Dandelion Dynasty. I'm very happy I read it. It's a real pillar of modern fantasy big series now, and I think just it's doing something so unique that for all of its really positive aspects, you're likely going to find a lot there to love, even if all of it doesn't connect. And so hope you found this informative and interesting, and let me know what you experienced, if you read any of these Dandelion Dynasty books, or what, based on what I was talking about, if there's anything that you are particularly excited about this series. So I'd love to hear about it in the comments, and I'll catch you later.